on and when did your book come out? Alone Sucks: God's
That came
Cure
out.
for Our Human Crisis.
That came out in 2017, and it just caught fire, and especially right now,
Yeah,
it just seems like every time there's a tragedy, there's another resurgence and another interview, and someone else wants to talk about, because everything else we deal with is a symptom, as of
right,
what you call loneliness, I call aloneness. Same
right.
same thing, but it's been a problem since the beginning of time. So
Yeah. What caused you to identify this as an issue? Because, like you said, as we're recording this, for those of you that are listening or watching, we're in the midst. I'm hoping the end, but maybe the middle. We don't know. The midst of this COVID-19 pandemic. And of course, everybody's talking about being alone now because we're kind of forced to. But
yeah,
but obviously, you were talking about it years ago. I've been thinking about it years ago. For you, what was the catalyst that made this actually come up on your radar?
it's a lifetime. It's a lifetime, and I unpack my entire story in the book. So I've been sitting on it. I was sitting on it for a long time. I grew up the youngest of four pastors' kids. I moved and moved and moved, like, I think I calculated like 18 homes in 18 years,
Wow.
and I don't know why that pops up. It's always in the middle of a recording. But let me do this a moment. That'll get rid of it. But there was always a sense of not belonging.
Mm.
And I've carried that for 50 years. I still battle with aloneness. There are times in my daily life, my family, ministry, um, even surrounded by a crowd, that I
Mm.
just feel like I don't fit, and I don't know necessarily how to share that. So I think it started as in my childhood by always having to fit in. And I
Right.
think most of us struggle with fitting in, not knowing that we belong. Um, we're already adopted into God's family. And especially for those people who don't have any faith whatsoever, I think it becomes an even greater struggle. And I don't know what brought it to a head, but I sat on it for a very long time and just realized it was time to write on this issue of aloneness. And I had outlined the book with my publisher, and I'd had three-quarters of it completely done. And in a quiet time one morning, God said, "That's not the book I asked you to write. You're going to tell your story." And he and I had an argument, and I lost it. But I told him, I said, I'm not writing my story without my wife Cindy's permission. And I told her that I was going to write my story and rewrite the book. And I told the publisher I'm rewriting the book. And he says, it goes to press in 2 months. And so Cindy and I talked through it and agreed. And she said, you're going to be crucified publicly when you let everyone know your entire story. And I haven't been, not a bit. If nothing, it was not only cathartic for me, but it's been therapeutic for my thousands and thousands of readers who have said, thank you for your being vulnerable and open and honest and transparent to let us know that real people have real problems.
Mm.
And so I don't think loneliness or aloneness plays any favorites with anybody.
Yeah.
The problem is we don't admit it.
Mm-hmm.
Especially in leadership, we don't admit it
Right.
because we are afraid that it is going to. Uh, it's career suicide. It's cultural
Yeah.
suicide, and we prefer we prefer the lie in the first place. We've preferred the lie since the Garden of Eden, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so it's a trust issue. Do we trust people with our weaknesses and our shame
Yeah.
and our problems and our sin? No, we don't. And
Do you think we have I mean, I kind of know the answer to this question, so but maybe you can help me flesh it out. Do you think we have dropped the ball in the church, in the faith world, of educating or teaching people how to really have those. You use a word that I use a lot too, which is those authentic relationships and kind of taking the mask out. Where did we drop the ball
I don't
on
know if I know,
teaching
Jack, I
people?
don't know if I know where we dropped the ball. I don't want to be indicting, but here's where I've come to a point in my life. I am unwilling to allow people to live alone anymore. And, but I don't want to be angry. You know, no one wants to listen to angry people,
Right.
but I am angry and I'm frustrated because we dropped the ball. You use the word authentic like I do. Um, the mission of my life at this moment is to help people live with authenticity in an artificial world, right? And I think that the church is an artificial atmosphere. We create plans and programs and
Mm,
services and experiences for people to fill a void. Now, I know we're trying to lead them to a deeper relationship with Christ, but in our crowds and our services and our gatherings, where we're striving for size and attendance and numbers, we lose intimacy. Discipleship doesn't take place in a crowd. Intimacy
mm,
doesn't take place in a crowd. Authenticity doesn't take place in a crowd. I mean, just the sociology of small group dynamics tells us that once we get out of a community of 6, 8, 10 people, we lose what we had. We
mm,
think, wow, this is really good. Let's invite more people into this. And as a result, we're going, it's not the same as it was now that we've invited more and more and more people to it. But then we celebrate the size, right? Like, wow, it's really growing, so it must be healthy. Is it? I mean, let's ask that question. Is it? So I am of the belief in 30 years of pastoral ministry that the church is guilty of propagating the problem inadvertently,
mm.
right?
Right. Right.
Inadvertently. But this is not new. God told us in Genesis 2, verse 18, it's not good to be alone. And that's not just about marriage. It's more about humanity.
Mm,
It's about everything that comes with connection and community. It's the accountability, it's the support, it's the encouragement, it's the ability to really then connect with people, confess our sin, confess our weaknesses, confess our hurts, share our doubts, share our worries. And so going back to just the premise of your question, have we dropped the ball? Yes, because we have a culture that doesn't allow the pastoral leader or shepherd to set the pace to say, me too.
mm.
Here's what I struggle with. Because people don't really want to hear our struggles. They want us to wear a
That's
mask.
right.
It's like going to a grocery store right now. Now, some of your listeners may not appreciate it, but I don't wear a mask. Okay. I live in the state of Michigan. We're sequestered for another 2 weeks. And then when I go to the store or the gas station, as infrequently as I need to, I've chosen not to wear a mask, and whether people agree with that or not. There's a small percentage, and it's becoming less and less because of people's frustration, but a small percentage of people look at you like, put your mask on. I put your mask on. I think the same thing is true in leadership. When we expose ourselves and we are vulnerable and naked and open with people, they say the same thing. Put your mask on.
Mm, yeah.
We prefer you with a mask. We don't want to see it. We'd rather you breathe your own bacteria, than show
Right.
us what you're really dealing with.
You
That,
you
that's
used
that's the problem.
Yeah, you use the word artificial, which I like. I like that too. I like that word too. I talk about counterfeit sometimes because I
Mhm.
think we've traded what God intended for a real authentic relationship for an artificial counterfeit. Uh, Second, it's not even second choice. It would be probably way down the list if God, chose Himself for us what He wants. And I wonder sometimes, we live in a world. I talk a lot about. especially among millennials and younger people. Technology and social media and all these things that we can connect with each other. So it seems like, well, I've got 3,500 Facebook friends. Do you really? Can you call any of those at 2
Think-
a.m.?
You have fake book friends too?
Yeah.
And sad, it's sad, but here's what we do. I mean, we look at this, and I am just as guilty of this. I'll look and go, huh, I've got 10,000 Instagram followers, as if that's my identity.
Right.
I
That's
don't
right.
know these people, they don't know me, and yet we use that like it's this artificial means of um, notice me. Oh, people like me. And so it's just as exacerbating the problem.
Yeah.
I mean, social media can be a great tool, but I mean, 9 times out of 10, almost every post that I see from people is just someone screaming, pay attention to me,
Yeah.
notice me, do I matter? You know, am I important? And if we don't get enough likes, we change it, we filter it, we delete it, we repost it, right?
That's right.
I'm 50 years old and do the same crap.
How do we, you and I are the same age. How do we get back to what real friendship? I think it really starts with real friendship. You talk about being authentic, and understandably so. You know, pastors, ministry leaders, leaders in general. You know, you can't, and probably shouldn't, because it wouldn't be wise to be vulnerable and totally throw all your junk, at somebody's face that you don't really have that trust relationship with.
Right?
You and I probably would agree, you need a few of those people in your life. How have you done that? How have you figured out how to find those people so that you're not living in aloneness or this cocoon of self-inflicted misery? Because we all have stepped out, and again, I think especially the younger folks, that many of them tell me, well, I've stepped out and I tried that and it didn't work.
Yeah.
So they
I
tried it one time and they give up.
yeah. I hear that, and there are going to be times that we try that, and it's people will use your past against you. Not even just your past, your present. People will use your problems against you. It becomes a weapon. Jack, it's there's no, as you know, there's no easy answer to that. I have a handful of people in my tribe. I would say that outside of my own pastoral staff that I work with, I have a couple of people locally outside of my home that I'm completely open and honest with. I mean, they could bury me. They could destroy my ministry. They know my weaknesses, and I have no problem sharing with them. And nationally, I have a lot more than I do locally, and that's
Mm,
probably because they're colleagues,
right.
and so they get it, right? They get it. They can empathize with it because they live in it every day. I think the only way to build that kind of friendship is actually to take the risk. And but people have to go into it with their eyes open, knowing that not everyone is going to reciprocate.
Hmm.
And there is no, I'm sorry, there's no safe way to do it. If you're looking for safety, then it's not relationship,
Right.
right? I mean, because even healthy relationships have their hurts and the holes that we fall into. So there are times you can encounter people that you just consider sacred or safe and kindred spirits that you feel like, okay, it's like flying a kite. You don't just throw the whole kite and the ball of string up in the air at once, right? You got to let a little bit out, let a little bit out,
Hmm.
let a little bit out. And if you don't sense somebody not just receiving what you're sharing, but reciprocating, that might be a warning to go, this might not be a long-term healthy relationship.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, and now I'm reticent to say this because something you said earlier, and I don't disagree that no, I don't think you need to expose your junk to everybody, right? But I do think you have to expose some level of vulnerability to everybody.
Right.
So if you're a leader, a manager, a CEO, a principal, a teacher, a parent, right? If someone reports to you, if someone looks to you, if you have influence, then we have got to take people off a pedestal, beginning with ourselves, and let people see. Because I mean, that's what builds bridges, right?
Right. That's right.
What builds bridges is honesty. And so that doesn't mean, it's like when someone, you coach someone to, they want to give a testimony what God has done in their life. Okay, give a testimony. Don't brag about your past. When you coach them through how to share what needs to be shared and how to have discernment of when to stop.
Right.
It's the same thing in building a friendship. And but we're not used to friendships where we know how to. And I'm guilty of this. Um, I I'm kind of I'm really an introvert. I'm a public professional extrovert, right? So when I'm on a stage or in a stadium or whatever it might be, um, I can get up and I can perform, and I can perform in a small group too. I can perform one on one, and I can let you see what I want you to see. I'm a
Right.
great chameleon, and like you say, I'm just being counterfeit, but I'm a chameleon. That has not served me well, and so part of it I think comes from experience and age. But like you said, younger people listening, I don't know that they have to go through life alone and learn the hard way if we would help them understand what a real friend looks like. I'm going to just a moment. I've got a document right here. A friend of mine, um, I'm a strong believer. I am a strong believer in counseling and therapy. And
Mm.
I have no problem admitting that. But a friend of mine who is a life coach for me right now, his name is Monty Hip. He has an organization called thecomplementer.com. He really comes alongside of people and helps them discover a new path and mission for their life. And I'm on one right now. But he gave me just literally 2 days ago definition to friendship. He says the single greatest definition of a good friend is not identified in the good times. It's identified where there's desperation and where your weaknesses are safe.
Mm. Wow.
Define where your weaknesses, desperation, and where your weaknesses are safe. That is a rarity.
Yes.
But I do think that he is onto something, that is a strong definition, if not the best definition I've heard of authentic friendship.
That's great. That's great. Well, and I think, again, our age, younger, older, it's the human condition, but especially it seems like in the younger age, and maybe because they have more of their life left, that I hear a lot, like you just said. Well, okay, I tried to find that friendship, and it didn't work. Which my answer is, okay, how's it working out for you? Just bailing and giving up. That's not working.
Right.
And if you go to a restaurant, you don't like it, you don't quit eating just because the one restaurant didn't serve
Right.
you well.
Right.
Um, so, but especially, I want to hit a quote that I read. Kind of how I got connected with you was this article that somehow somebody forwarded to me. Especially when it comes to leadership, because you said the loneliness of leadership is a self-inflicted wound. And some of the people that you referred to are people that I know too, and many of my friends, unfortunately, have chosen a permanent path
Yeah.
out of the world to a temporary problem. But why do you think that is, especially for us as leaders? What can we do? What are some things that you would suggest um, for somebody who's in a leadership position to not get in that self-inflicted condition? Some of it is, I know, what we're kind of talking about, friendship and but how have you done that? You mentioned a couple of those, but is there any other things that you would suggest to somebody who finds himself in that leadership position?
I think maybe that goes back to understanding, at least from my perspective, the definition of leadership. My job is not to call the shots, cast the vision, and tell people where we're going. That's not my job. Now, I think people think that is the role of leadership. Like, I'm supposed to lead, I'm supposed to be first, I'm supposed to know all the answers. No. A friend of mine called me a few years ago. He was the chairman of my board at the time, and wanted to know if I knew my job description. Now, this man's a CEO of a Fortune 500 company. He's got 140,000 employees. I happen to answer to him on my board. And so when the phone rings, I know his time is very limited. And so he asked me, Tim, what's the definition of your role? I mean, define your role as CEO to me. And I said, that it's to cast vision and build a team and lead a team. Click. He hung up. He just flat out hung up the phone. I'm like, obviously wrong. And so I thought he's going to call me back, and I better have a better. He just didn't even say, hey, I'll talk to you later. Just click. God, called me back a couple of days later, and I gave him the same answer with flowery words. And he said, listen, I'll call you back on Friday. Think about my answer, my question. He called me back and he said, I don't have time for you today to try to give me an answer. Let me tell you the answer, which you should already know. Your job is to release the potential of people. Release their potential. The only way you release people's potential is give them the opportunity to work in their strengths, to identify their weaknesses, and make them co-equals and co-laborers in your cause, whether it be a congregation, a company, right?
Right.
Family dynamics, marriage, working together as one. We each have a role to play, but my job's not to tell you the answers. My job is to ask better questions and let you figure things out for yourself. And so one of the ways to answer your question that I do that is I don't isolate myself in an office. In the midst of everything I do, traveling 120 days a year, writing and speaking and running another global organization, I still serve as the lead pastor of a church that I helped plant 25 years ago. And for 25 years, Jack, I have never had an office in the church. And people say, don't you, because even when we built onto the church and built onto the church and built onto the church, they're like, we need to build more office space for all our pastors. And I'm like, why? Because the policy in our particular congregation is that you will spend 75% of your time outside of the church and 25% of your time in the church. And if you spend more than 25% of your time in the church, it's grounds for firing. Because relationships are what change lives. Not sermons, not Bible studies, right? It's interaction, it's connection, it's community. It's how God reveals himself to us in three persons, working together, equally. And sometimes we take ourselves out of that working together and set ourselves apart into I'm talking to pastors, into the pastor's study. Who are you influencing? My wife's a 7th grade school teacher, and she says, you think way too much of yourself. The average attention span is 12 minutes, but you had to go for 45 because what you said was so important. She said, but 99% of people quit listening 30 minutes ago. So if you really want to change people's lives, it's not about what I say from the pulpit. It's what I do when I'm face to face in person with you. So I've learned to be in person on purpose more than I am isolated, because isolated is artificial, right? And so, and I know people may be offended by this, but our sermons, while it's the word of God, I mean, the word of God does the speaking, right? They're built up. Why? Sometimes it's a notice me. He's a great speaker. Man, was that a great sermon? And it's no different than when I have a conversation with like individuals like you or people on a face-to-face conversation. We talk about aloneness. They go, absolutely, I agree with that. It's like the amen moment, and then they leave and do nothing. Sometimes the same things happens on Sunday morning, believe it or not, right? I give this great message, and people go, oh, yes, great message today. Nothing changes. So for me, if I'm going to help people live with authenticity in an artificial world, I have got to leave the privacy. Now, there's times for isolation and solitude. Jesus shows us that in his own life. But how do we break free from that trap? We start spending more time with people than just planning for our time that we're going to be in front of people. Why do I call it self-inflicted? Because that's a choice. Just like I choose to go in my office and shut my door, I have to choose to open my door and leave my office and go where people are at. Then
Yeah.
I choose who I invest my time in. And it's like the friendship thing. I'm not going to share with everybody and invest in everybody, but I'm going to help others by example, um, see what it looks like to nurture a healthy, cohesive, symbiotic relationship built around authenticity and trust. And I think trust is probably our
Yeah.
greatest issue.
Yeah. Yeah. It is. I was reading. I'm glad you said that because I was researching and doing some reading a couple years back, which was another kind of um, idea of the catalyst for putting this stuff in a book about the guys who co-founded Airbnb,
Mm,
and they were being interviewed, and the interviewer asked them, what'd you guys start this company for? It's probably to make money because this is a great idea. And of course, Airbnb at my last reading was, one of the top hospitality entities in the world.
yeah.
And they said actually it wasn't about money; it was about community. And so I'm like, okay, I got to hear this about community. And so they go on to talk about, if you stay in a two-story townhouse, in DC instead of a hotel, but somebody's townhouse, and they tell you the cool places to eat that aren't going to show up, on the hotel list. Um, they said that builds relationship with people, and you trust those people because you're staying. So it was just interesting to see that even they're thinking about trust and community in the business world, and sometimes we miss it in the ministry real relationship world. um, your book Alone Sucks: God's Cure for Our Human Crises, if somebody wants to get in touch with you, man, I could talk to you for many more hours, but I know you're busy. What's the best way for them to get connected with you, or dig deeper into this whole issue of aloneness?
Just go to alonesucks.com. And so there's a link to buy the book. I mean, you can buy it anywhere. I always tell people I prefer you buy it directly from me. Jack, you're an author. You know that when you sell things on Amazon, you make 12 cents.
Yeah.
And so
That's right.
if they buy it from me, I promise I'll sign it and give you a handwritten note, and then I can connect with you because I do have additional resources that I'm writing and creating all the time with my own writing and podcast to help people through this issue of aloneness and authenticity. And so if they go to alonesucks.com, when they purchase the book or read more information, there's curriculum for churches, there's sermon series for pastors, that they can get through my online store that can help them personally,
Mm,
privately, or give them a tool they can help with the people they serve and support.
yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Man, grateful to get to connect with you for a little bit today. Anything that I haven't asked that you're like, oh, I really want to make sure I get this in to share with people?
No, other than it takes courage, right?
Mm,
So I'm this morning I'm working on my online sermon. They're all of us are delivering to a video right now, and I'm speaking on 2 Timothy 1:6 and 7, that God has not given us a spirit of fear and timidity, but of power and courage, right?
mm, mm,
And while that's really about sharing our faith, um, we have to go back to that first part of it, not a spirit of fear. What keeps us alone? What keeps us from being vulnerable? What keeps us from trusting people? We're afraid. We're afraid of what might happen if we're honest and open. But what we have learned at the same time from experience, if we look back at our lives, is that when we do draw on the strength that God has given us to be open and honest, we do more good for others. 9 times out of 10, people will be blessed by our vulnerability. Yes, there's a percentage. I don't know if it's 10% but it's smaller, of
mm.
people who may try to use that to do damage. But our job is to help people and release their potential and get in their whole with them, because they can't be whole, WHOLE, today, unless we get in their whole with them, right?
Mm,
So
mm,
we have to get in their whole with them. The only way to remove aloneness, your own aloneness, if you're listening and you're struggling with aloneness, The only way to remove your aloneness is to choose to remove the aloneness of others.
Mm. Yeah.
Think more of somebody else, and you will come through the other side. Focus on yourself, and your hole will get deeper.
Mm. Yeah. Man, that's a great word. That's a great word. Wow. Thank you.